Hi, welcome to Faster Presents Assess, Coach, Train. This is a course designed to show you how to run through a system that will allow you to get hold of a client, see how they should move, train them to move better where better's defined by their own body, and then deliver training sessions on the back of that will result in some long-term change. The main goal in here is to show you how technology can help you with this, and if used correctly will prove to be a very important component of what you do. So the course is built in order to take you through the whole system. So we start with the faster principles that kind of underlie everything we do. And then we have a look at how we use technology in assessments. This is particularly great if you want to start doing training online, but training online with a sort of a higher level of client. Or if you train clients that are high level and they want to hire you for a specific reason based in movement. We look at coaching to find normal motion, and so what the client displays within an exercise probably isn't their optimum way of doing it, but also the optimum way isn't something you could just go away and predefine. And so what you need to do is find a way of coaxing out really good movement from your client, and we'll show how to do that, and then how to then take that movement and connect your client to the feeling of that movement so that they can subconsciously move well, and then when things start to go off course, they'll be conscious of the fact and be able to start making some changes. We'll look at Faster's key skills of assessment, and this is to show you how we define a movement screen in sort of the vaguest of ways, but in something that you can specifically take to your client and use immediately, giving you a place to go to when you meet the client that hasn't got that massively specific goal, just wants to get fitter, whatever their definition of that is. It will also allow you to start to break up what fitness is, and specifically why you can't label a mechanic and a workload together as one to define fitness until you've spoken to the client. And this is going to be something that we look at, especially in terms of things such as Olympic lifting, perhaps. We're going to look at how you might start to build some solutions for your client based on what you've seen and what they want to do, and we'll touch there into energy systems and building programming, and that's something that will then show you how you can do using technology that's available, where the technology can start to help you deliver a product and a service that's just way above what people would expect from a personal trainer. And so that's how the course is going to go and develop point by point. And this is my way of sharing with you what's been successful for me as a trainer. So someone who's come from the trenches, I clean changing rooms and watch poolsides, and developed all the way to training royalty and just top level clients who are very type A. They know exactly what they want and they demand that, but they pay well for it and they respect the fact that you deliver that and you don't assert your beliefs on that individual. You just deliver what's asked of you. Plus all the other cool things that it's helped me do in the industry, training pro athletes, meeting lots of trainers and helping trainers develop. I want you to see how that system builds itself up and how you could do the same or something similar and start to produce a service that people are sort of wowed by. They're knocked over. They can't believe what they're getting from you and how well you're delivering it for them. So the Faster principles are built on years of learning and learning from people, coaches, business people, training, clients and experience from training clients, meeting fitness and industry gurus or whatever you want to call them, having some really good friends in research who push and pull you to be the best that you can be. And so that's helped define some faster principles, and it's the faster principles that we look to see if a technique is right, if an assessment is right. It helps guide us. It's a growing list. Quite often things move out of the list and into the list. It'll never be fully defined. I don't think it'll ever be fully proven. We kind of err on the side of if science has said it's right, it's right. If science has said it's wrong, it's definitely wrong. If science has said nothing about it, we look for a technician in that area and we perhaps try and see what they do and try and put the science to it to explain it. But we're very sort of aware of the difficulty in doing that. The other component here when we built the FASTER principles is that FASTER has principles built on experience, but in a big knowledge that in some areas there's years of experience, and you can almost make an assumption or make a guess or work on intuition. But as soon as you step out of that small boundary of ability and experience, then you're in a place where you can't make those decisions. You can't just be arrogant enough to think, well, I'm good at this, so I must be good at that. If you look across the industry, a lot of that goes on. I'm great in this field, so I therefore must be great in another field, is always a risky place to go. So FASTER's background is working with clients who want to improve through movement. Diet and nutrition and lifestyle are things that, if they're asked of us, we have to work hard to find the answer. But in terms of movement, we've got years of experience, and we've got friends around us that pull us apart on research, which is kind of cool too. So it's important here to know that we work on the facts that injuries are really hard to predict. There's no real such thing as a something injury. So you wouldn't really hear like there's a running injury or soccer injury or something like that. But an injury is an injury. It's a dysfunction of the body. And so the only real sort of evidence to show that an injury might occur with you is it occurred before and then you're susceptible to it again. And so we try not to make the judgment that the client will get injured unless they've got a history that will point them that way. We look at sport and daily motion and how that can influence an injury potential. So the thought is, if you play a sport where certain key injuries are common, then we try and protect you against the possibility of that injury happening. But we're not saying you play that sport, you will get that injury. We're not saying you play that sport, it will cause that injury, or you have that injury, it was caused by that sport. But what we are saying is we'll cover our backs and say, well, let's use common injuries to give us an idea of what skills you might need to possess to prevent you being in the position that will cause the injury. When a client moves, their movement is a reflection of skill, habit, and structural capability. And so this is an important thing, because when you start to try and change someone's movement, you've also got to think, well, structurally, is that something that's right for them, even though it might be wrong for them and right for someone else? Do they pick it because it's a structural problem, or do they pick it because it's their skill or it's their habit? And what am I going to change? What are the knock-on causes that are going to come about from me trying to change a movement? And so this is important because then it leads us to the next point, which is skill can be good and bad. So you could be very skillful at squatting, and you could get to the floor in a certain way, but the way you get to the floor is also detrimental to other things you do. And so the skill of getting to the floor could be bad, and it could be good. And what my point here is that maybe it's a bad skill that you choose to use repeatedly because you've been coached that skill on top of the skill that's a good skill that you have naturally that doesn't look like the way everyone else does it. But it might be that you choose a particular movement based on your skill level, and your skill level is based on a common cause, not a proper movement. And so you're either overlaying what would be considered a good movement on top of what would be considered a bad movement. What you're actually doing is laying a bad movement on what's been deemed a bad movement, but is actually an individual movement. And it's a kind of complicated principle, but essentially what I'm saying is that if you see a movement and you think that's a tight hamstring, you might just be seeing a skill that you consider to be a bad skill. Depending on how they came about to pick that movement, you could be both right and wrong. And so what we need to be able to do is say, well, what's your natural ideal way of moving? We're going to call that a good skill. And anything that we've imposed or forced on that movement, we're going to cause that a bad skill. And if that's a bad skill laid on top of a structural capability that you don't have and turn into a habit that you don't need, then that's when you could be pushing yourself into an injury. And that's something we'll look at in more detail as we move through the course. But it certainly influences how we choose to coach people. Short-term changes via the nervous system, and by that I'm talking about if you in one session see someone improve their golf swing, their throw, their ability to squat, their ability to run, their flexibility or their strength within that session, then you've not made a structural change, you've made a nervous system change. And so the way that you're going to keep that is to keep making that nervous system change until it becomes a structural change as well. And so, but the important thing there is when people are claiming, we've increased your hamstring flexibility. Well, the way you've done it, if you relate that to how the nervous system's working, maybe you've increased someone's flexibility, but you've also decreased their ability to respond. And so you get a range of motion but lose the response. You've not actually changed the structure there. All you've done is you've reduced sort of like the nervous system's need to control or level of intensity of control over the range. Structural changes take conditioning of a longer term. So if you did want to improve someone's range of motion, then you need to do it in a very specific way to where you want the range of motion to occur. And you need to do it through training against resistance in full ranges until that body can keep that movement and make it a more structural change rather than just a nervous system trick. It's important to know that common sense doesn't equal scientific fact, and that's one of the hardest things to get your head around as a trainer, and it's one of the hardest things to get your head around as an educator too, because you see lots of great results, if you want to deem them results, and then people put some great explanations to them, which make a lot of sense, but quite often are not scientific enough to be as specific as they'll tell you. And so over the years we've gone a cycle of different things: do cardio, don't do cardio. We're in the middle of don't do cardio as I present this course. But the important thing to note here is that people say things, they give you a good argument, they omit facts, they bend science, they blur science. Some classic things you want to be careful of. People say, this is the truth of. Well, the truth in fitness and performance and injury prevention and even injury recovery from a specific point of reducing the time it takes to recover, all those things are very poorly proven, if proven at all. So rarely when people say the truth, they say, this makes so much sense to me, I can't see how it's wrong. Well, that doesn't really make it a scientific fact. That makes it the best technique they can pick at the time on the knowledge they have available at the time. So it's not as if they think they're lying to you. It's just a way of saying, I'm so convinced by this technique. I've got so many good results. I must be right. And that's when you want the alarm bells to be going off, the flags to be flying, because it's at that point people start to omit evidence that work against them. The reality is that the science in our industry isn't massively comprehensive yet. We don't have enough years behind it to be able to give a black and white answer, and so people hide in the sort of the case study. They hide in the it sounds good enough to be fact, and that's something that we've got to be careful of. As a group of trainers, we've got to be extra specially careful, because we're all very similar in attitude to exercise and movement, and that might not give us the ability to then see things from all angles. The people who present to us have been around for a lot of years, and they're presenting similar stuff, but they by default will omit results that have gone bad where they've got it wrong. And so I'm not saying at Faster we're always right. In fact, we're quite often wrong, and if we're not wrong, we're vague enough that we're right in areas and wrong in others. What I'm saying is your ability to be able to judge information is very important, and so if it's common sense, then you want to challenge that. Much of training as an educated guest is really that point. So knowing that that's our components, when people tell us this is the truth, this is a definitive, we question it. When people say, I got this amazing result in one session, we question it. When people start to tell us that the reason they do stuff is based on case study, we question it. And what we're looking for is either good science or a great technician we can lean on, and then we'll get to our technique and our solution. The other important thing here is our goal is to coach someone to move better. Sometimes it's not about the best technique, it's about the most convincing technique for that person to help them out. And so then it's within your ability and your skill level to deliver that technique. Sometimes you're going to have to just say, a good example might be someone says they want to be stronger. You see that they want to be stronger while running, holding off an opponent, but their thought process, their belief system is they're not strong unless they've lifted a lot of weight. Now, as much as you want to get them sprinting and pushing things over and holding people back and doing things where you're training in tension, what's actually going to happen is you're going to have to back off and do some of the training that they want, because the psychology of that is going to lead them to a better performance way above what you do from a physical perspective. So sort of more principles, and this is getting a little bit more specific now into how this affects how we train. So training should be as close to performance as possible, just because the transfer of training to performance is really not well proven at all. And certainly from a mechanical standpoint, there's no real proof on carryover. It's all interlaid too much with energy systems, and so the most precise we can be is being as close to the doing the thing as we possibly can, and that means you have to have a good mechanical eye. You've got to see the biomechanics of the movement, and then be able to recreate those. That you've got to be able to see the environment, see the loading tool, put that all together, and try and get your training as close to this performance as possible. Injury prevention is about skill and long-term activity. So what essentially we mean is that your body has sort of an inherent strength around each joint, which is not related to how much you can lift, but is around the sort of the tension and the stiffness in the tissue is what will either allow you to tear or stop you from tearing when you get to a position where an injury could occur. So the only way to improve this stiffness is to be active over a long period of time, as far as the research says now. And a good guy to look out for on this is a guy called Mark Hines, who's releasing research on this over the next sort of 5 years. But with that in mind, most of the people we train will have done long-term activity, so we'll have as much protection as they can get structurally from injury. So then the next way you prevent injury is to develop the skills, the coordination, the quickness, the reactiveness of the body, and the experience in all different environments to be able to get away from the position that will cause the injury and sort of lead you into a place where you can just carry on training, and when you hit an environment that throws you to a place of injury, your body just eats that motion up, pulls you out of that place. It's got so much experience there it can handle it. So for us, we're trying to produce training environments that are close to what the client does, with movements within there that are close to what could cause a problem for our client. Now, we believe that you should coach first, sequence second, and structure third. And so if you think about this from an in-session and a periodized session point of view, the coaching and the sequencing, that's about the skill level, the effects from all ends of training that are acute, that happen in the session. So mainly we're talking about a nervous system response. Well, we're not trying to be tricking the nervous system. We're not trying to create anything in there other than authentic environments, authentic movements, authentic problems for the body to solve. And as a coach first, we're trying to see if the body can find its own natural way of doing this. For the sequencing second, we're looking for things that look abnormal. It's, the whole body went left and the leg went right. That's not correct unless going right is part of the skill. So do we have the ability to get hold of the sequencing and see anomalies? And then can we think of a way of coaching out the anomaly? And that's something that's quite important for you to try and get your head around a little bit. How do we get into this movement and then do something with it and change it up and make it work as we want to? Then the third component is structure. So this is longer term. So this might be, look, we've seen you one-legged squat. We tend to see that you wobble at the knee before you come out and you feel underpowered. We coached you with all kinds of angles, and what we found was once your body started to find new ranges, we lost a lot of the wobble. And so the sequencing that we saw prompted the coaching. The coaching now prompts us back to, can we make this go wrong? So then we fatigued you as far as we could, and the sequencing told us that you were fatigued because the knee wobble came back in. And we thought, right, well, we gave you the same coaching back and we couldn't get rid of the knee wobble this time. So this is a structure thing. This is a strength in that range thing. So now we're going to try and work out how we can build a very specific strength, power, flexibility in that range at that endurance level that will mean that when you get fatigued and you need that one-legged squat, you don't get the knee wobble, you don't get underpowered, and you don't end up in positions of injury. And we're going to do it the same way. We're going to coach, and we're going to check the sequence, and we're going to coach, and we're going to try and affect the sequence. When we affect the sequence, we're going to try and put it back, and we're going to keep doing that week on week until we change the structure. Now, sometimes changing the structure might mean that we have to do something in a shoe, or we have to do something about the weight or the way the movements move to assist the structure in session to allow us to get to that point. And so that's something that's really important to see. Now, when we look at structure, we look at biomechanics, we look at how the body moves, we consider that bones move first for the majority of the motion. And that's really important to know. So if you think of a squat, in a squat, the first thing to move is the first thing to happen is the desire to squat. And then the second thing is that you ramp down some of your tension in some of your muscles, and you move your center of gravity, and that starts this whole process of collapsing down. And then your bones move, which change the stretching of the joints, and they change the stretch in the muscles, and that gives you a nervous system response that combined with skill and experience and anticipation will give you a muscular response. And so the bones will move and the joints will feel, but by joints feel, the joints, the muscles, everything will feel, and then there'll be a reaction from a movement component of your body. So it might be central nervous system powered, it might be more locally powered, but there's a muscle reaction to this movement. And so we then would say, well, so if we want to then hit any one part of those three components, we always start with the bones moving. If someone wanted to work backwards and they said, right, I'm not interested in my movement, I just want a stronger, say, glute, then the goal is to make the bones move, to get the joints to feel something different, something that will engage the glute. And then we want the glute to react to that environment and be able to pull you out of that motion. And then depending on the skill we want that all to be timed right, so that you get the right sequence, so the structure can respond in the way that it should, and how we want it to respond. And then that's how we'll get that very specific muscle reaction to the movement we're after. So when we know that, we also want to start to play in that ranges are movement specific, and they can show a habit, not necessarily a structure. And this is important, and this is why you won't very often see us lying someone on a table, checking hip range of motion, and then saying, well, that equates to something else. And so a lot of tests are put in place, and then the trainer measures the client on the test. And so their improvement in the test is the trainer's measure that they're improving the client. But that's not always true, and it's not always the outcome. And so our outcome is, we would only be looking for ranges of motion if it affects the skill of the movement, or if it changes the sequence of the motion. And so we're not looking at putting ranges back in for ranges' sake. So it wouldn't be often we'd say you're lacking dorsiflexion, but it might be often that we're saying during this squat we notice that the ankle can't perform for the amount of time required in order to allow your hip, knee, and the rest of the body to go through the motions required for you to hit the range we want. And so that would be specific to squat, but that might not occur when the person's doing something like a lunge or a turn or a twist or a reach. And so we would look to measure the range where the range is needed. And we would know that it might be a habit, it might be a fear, it might be a skill, it might be a structure. And we would then start to work on that. If it's a structural thing, we think that's long term, and perhaps we need environment changes to help it. Perhaps it's a structure we can't change and we need a different way of performing that skill. But what it means is that you won't see us spend a lot of time saying, well, let's get you in the Thomas test, and then let's get you into hip extension, assisted stretching. But you will see us spending a lot of time saying, can we get you near your end range, and then can we put you into all different positions to trick you into the skill of getting a bit lower and coming out of that place. In our training, strength, range, and power are long-term goals that are inseparable. And that's a massively important thing for you to know, because it means when we're training our clients, we're not looking for our clients to show a certain amount of strength in one exercise to show carryover to something else. So for us, strength is moving through a range slowly against a resistance. Range is moving through a range at whatever the right pace is with the right load. And power is how fast you can get in and out of that. And all three are all the components put together that show you how you move well in and move well out. And so all three can be are normally underperforming in someone as they move. So there's certain nervous system tricks you can play with to get 1, 2, or all three to change in a session. But they're all long-term goals that you want to play with, so you keep consistency, so the body gets a more permanent change to improve. And that's more than around how do we get the right energy systems, how do we get the right mechanics married to the energy systems, how do we get the load correct to do that. Eliciting energy systems safely is how you change muscle size. That's important. Some people just want to get bigger. Some people just don't want to get bigger. How you get to the energy system will be safely, and so the mechanic that you build will then have to have the load you can handle. And if you build a mechanic with a maximum load that can be done a lot of times or not at all, you might be out of the energy system you want to hit. So you might have to then compromise the mechanic in order to get to the energy system you're after. And that becomes specific. That becomes very important, specifically with clients who want to do something with a body change, like a change in muscle size, perhaps. If you want to change fat percentage, then food and activity together is how you influence that. And there's many theories on that. What we do in the movement side is we can get to the energy system to change your muscle makeup, to change the amount of energy you expend over a week. And it's those two things we can control. When we get into the end result, there's a system, there's a program we use that can help with the nutrition side and help your client get into a level that you want. If you've got a really strong background in nutrition, you can change that system and work with it. If you don't have a very good background in that, then that's fine too, because there's already pre-built kind of nutrition programs within it, diets and all that kind of stuff.